maybe what happens is that I went anyway, or you can also rent the registration and you got you. Of course, if you want. I'm trying to register for this class. Registration, let's do the registration here. Interestingly, or maybe not interestingly, all of the years is anything in this class. So something didn't get set up properly. Something didn't get set up properly. Yeah, copy on it. And if that way, if you don't hear from them, they know I'm watching. If you don't hear from them, then I can write and say, hey, I just want to follow up on this registration. All right? Cool. All right.
You haven't had to read, right? The read it and maybe like, did you start the part 2?
For what?
The project. It's like due like next week or something. Maybe he might move it. I'm not sure.
Oh, but it wasn't good today. What?
No.
Okay.
It's on the 31st.
Okay.
For the part 2, is it still due next Thursday?
Yep.
It'll be shorter though.
So we're just finding examples of those different kind from the video.
Yes, you can use the video. This time, I'm going to talk about, I was going to talk about it next time, but I'll tell you now. It is basically you're looking for errors in the way they form words, right? The first one was they pronounced this wrong, essentially. Right? They had differences in the way they pronounce things. This one is going to be looking at words and going, oh, they needed to put an S on the end of this word because it was plural. Or they should have put an ED on the end of this word because it was in the past. Those are typical things that happen. And so you're going to go through there, kind of explain explain what's wrong and give me some examples. Okay? And I think it's set up for 5. Anybody read it later? I'm gonna have it, bring it in on Thursday or Friday. Everybody have a good break? Well, that's good. People send you off on a break. The other one may actually still be over in the library in reserve. We haven't messed with it for years. But I'm not sure it's going to help you much. Well, I thought you were doing preschool.
Well, I mean, I want to do elementary school and preschool.
Okay, well, yeah, you may find something in there that you can use. They've got some other things that you're paying. You may find something that works well. Well, sir, Okay. Looking from front to back. Ashley. Here. Kimberly. Yeah. Here. And of course, we don't have Christina, but we do have Cindy. So I just pulled that up. Just in case you were confused. You never know why. Okay. So, how was everybody's break for those I didn't ask already? Got one phone, got two phones, 3, 4, 5. Man, that's not too good out of like 12. 15. Okay. Let us go over the exam. Just to give you a feel for how things went. I think the highest score is 24.3 out of 25. The lowest score was 12.8 out of 25. There were 6 A's, 6 B's, 1 C, and 2 less than C. And the average score was about 21 out of 25. So that's about 84%. Usually I'm looking for something to hit around 80, 81, 79 to 81. Usually I think the biggest score. This guys did good because you beat that. I didn't think you were going to get that much higher. So in any case, 21 out of 25 is a pretty good score overall. So with that, I attached the first part. Almost everybody got 10 out of 10 on that one. Was it 20? I forgot how I had it. Nonetheless, they had 100% on most of those. A couple of people didn't, but for the most part, it was 20 out of 20. With that in mind, let's go ahead and walk through the midterm so that you, if I mark something, you'll know why that was. Starting up at part 3, the first one was citizen, and then there was coffee and judgment. 4 and 5 were similar, they're kind of related. One is breath, number 4 was breath, and number 5 is breathe. And then the last one, number 6, was interesting. Okay? People generally get good scores on that. The next one's a little harder. That's why they're 2 points each. One of the areas that I saw a problem with on 7 was largely a lot of people spelled it. Several people used a C instead of a K. You remember I said the C is a totally different character. K was what we needed. I saw a lot of people use just the regular A by itself as opposed to cat. was one problem that was on that one. So people tried to spell. Now, the next one, number 8, was a problem in that many people put in single. They put S-I, the N with the hook, and then they went straight to the L. But you remember we talked about some words actually have to have the as well as the G, because we pronounced them both, single, finger. And other places like singer, well, you wouldn't put a G in there because we don't typically call it singer. Okay? But that was the biggest problem on that one. The next one, calculation. Few problems there, but I think the biggest one was putting KU in the middle, which would have been calculation. But I think we all call it calculation, therefore it had to have the K and the Y in there. Different people spelled the last part a little differently. I didn't worry too much about that one. I was really kind of looking for the the Q part. Check, just about everybody got that one. Morphine, again, some people tried to spell that. They put an extra E at the end. Some people used something different for either the O or the E. So that was where that one was. Bookshelf came through pretty good. Bookshelf and broom was also quite good. Okay. So that's kind of the transcription stuff out of IPA and then back into IPA. When you get down to the bottom, the first thing there was theta. That would be a minus voice plus fricative plus interdental. I didn't worry about which order you put those in. The which we saw up in single, which is voice, velar, nasal, all plus it. The is plus back, plus low, plus lax, and plus spread. We used minus round, that was okay, or minus tenth, that would have been fine as well. Then we've got the E, and that's the one that's pronounced as E, and that should be plus front, high, plus tenth, and plus spread. Okay. And then P should have been a voiceless bilabial stop. Okay. Got a whole row by yourself. You're special. Okay. Anyway, we're here for the high score, the low score, the average score, and the way the grades for that. Okay, and we're just kind of going over the answers. We just finished the first page. Going to the second page. A lot of variety on what the V with the tilde over it was. And then some people, even though it says right next to it, no, B is for vowel and C is for consonant. I got a couple places where people call them the fricative V, but that's not what it talks about there. So this one should have read vowels become nasalized before a nasal consonant. And number 20, which also again has B and C in it, vowels become lengthened before voiced consonants. 20 was pretty straightforward. I think most people got that one correct. 19 had a few errors, like some people would call that lengthened, and some people called it accented and so forth. But that tilde over there, just think about the nasal sound in Spanish, right? That's what that one is trying to talk through. Okay. Down at the bottom, let's see, that should be minus voice plus stop inside brackets. becomes, that's the arrow. Then you've got somehow marking that this was aspirated. Some people put plus ASP or plus aspirated. Those were the two common ones. And then you have the big slash. And you've got this vowel with plus stress under it. The underline and then vowel with the minus stress. Okay. And then finally, using IPA symbol instead of the distinctive features, it should be S inside slashes, becomes T inside square brackets. In the environment where it comes at the end of the word. Remember, the end of the word is where you've got the underline and then you've got the pound sign. There were a lot of people who put the pound sign first, which would say at the beginning of the word. And so that was what we've got on those. Questions on page 2? Okay, minimal pairs was the one where people seem not to do too well. You may remember we did an exercise on minimal pairs, and I gave you that extra reading about minimal pairs with lots of examples. Basically, what you should have done, and if you gave me words that showed the issue, I didn't say you had to have it in IPA other than what I suggested that you do. We could use any kind of word like bag and back, gap and cap, could have been at the beginning, could have been at the end. Another person gave me grain and crane. That was a new one. I haven't seen that one. That one worked well. And then one to show that it and E are different. Sit and sit. I'm sorry, sit and seat. Or it and eat. Those would both work, right? All you were trying to do was find a word where I had the lowercase I in front of the P and the uppercase I. All right, so that one was that. Biology has 2 parts, bio and logy. Crocodile's all by itself, it's just one. I mean, there are multiple syllables there, but there really isn't a real crocodile. Maybe try off with dial. So that one only had 1. Bats has 2. Scanners has 3. Scanners, that's 3. And re-promoting also has 3. Re-promote and ING. Now, one thing I decided, there's an awful lot. Luckily, we're starting to talk about parts of speech today. A lot of people had the wrong parts of speech in there, particularly where it came together. I don't think I marked off for that. If you see that I did, you let me know so I fix it. But action, we've got the vowel act and the ION. So we're going from vowel to a noun. Incurable. Well, on that one, we had to go curable because there really isn't a word incurable. But curable is a word, and then incurable would be a word with adjective going on both of those 2 junction points. So incurable is an adjective overall. Seasonally, got to watch that one. I had a lot of people with seasonal as one and then leave, but actually it's season. And then als to make it go from season a noun to seasonal, an adjective. To seasonally, an adverb. Activate and deactivate. A couple people put too many things, try to put too many things together for the root, but generally it should be act and if. Goes from a verb to an adjective, act and active. Then we go to activate, which drives it back to being a verb again. And deactivate, which also leads to as a verb. And then well, book and S. All right. Questions on that page? Okay. on the last page, you can put a high score on this page. I've got S is a I, then this is a D, N is a stop, and mint is D. Stop was neither, actually, so I should say that. I, D, neither, then I got D, I, D once again. Okay, for I's are for inflectional, D is for derivation. Then, people did pretty good on 41, provide 3 pieces of evidence that clue is a morpheme, so we had include, exclude, seclude, conclude, preclude, and a bunch of others. And we all recognize that clue can't really stand by itself, so that one is found. Yeah. Okay. And so last page, okay, so we know clue is found because it can't stand by itself. How do you know that itty in the word ability is not an inflectional? And basically, what able is an adjective and ability is a noun. We said inflectionals don't change the word type. So in this case, we see the word type or the part of speech changing. And so that's how we knew that itty is not inflectional. Similarly, when you look at the word in 44, how do you know that this in the word disability is derivational? The simple answer there is it's a prefix. It didn't change the word type, but you'll remember we said it doesn't have to. And that's basically the only way you could say it's not one of the 8, but I didn't like that answer, so nobody tried that one. But disability is basically this as a prefix. And let's see, provide an example of an English word formed by blending. I have lots of those: smog and brunch, infomercial, some things like that. Provide an example of English word formed by the acronym process. I have FEMA, but there were lots of other ones that were there. So remember that the acronym is when you put those letters together and you say it as a word, not as the individual letter. And then finally, provide an example of English word. I must have had an impact. Lots of people wrote pistol, check. So I've had an impact. I took the easy way out, just like taco. So that's what I do. Okay, here's the deal. If you see something in here that you think is unfairly graded, or that I graded wrong, or that I added up the points wrong, I really, really, really want you to come and tell me. Okay? Unless I added up the parts and gave you more points than you were supposed to get, in which case keep it to yourself. However, if you see something in there that I didn't understand, or that I just clearly made an error on, please let me know so we can verify that it should be fixed and then fix it. Are we good? Again, 84, doing this in an in-class test, but you did good over all this class, so that was important. All right, that brings us to the conclusion of phonetics, phonology, and morphology. Today we're starting syntax. Here's the homework for Thursday. You may remember I sent you an email yesterday with a handout on it. We'll do a couple of those parts of speech items in class, but then I want you to finish it up. And also do exercise A. page 49. Something that you can do, if you pull out your syllabus, in week 11, I have a listing there for read 63 to 69. We're not going to read that because it gets people confused. We're going to talk about it a little bit. But unless you're going to take a more advanced syntax class sometime, probably not all that useful. So what I would suggest is just take that 63 to 69 that's in week 11, scratch it out. And I'll either get you different readings or we'll just talk about it. Okay? For Thursday, I would like you to bring part 2 of the term project. Bring the instruction sheet so we can talk about what's going to be due on part 2. And remember that part 2, it should have a 2 there, is due a week from Thursday. You got about 10 days from this point. But if you will bring that instruction sheet, we'll talk it over, make sure you're clear on what we're looking for. On the first one, we were looking for pronunciation errors, essentially. We were listening to the guy speak and recognizing the places that he was pronouncing things strangely, or he's leaving off letters in some cases as well. We're not interested really in the pronunciation thing for part 2, but we are interested where he's left off word endings or where he's put word endings that shouldn't be there, or he's used wrong verb tenses. So we'll talk about all of that. But we're now going to look at wrong word or wrong word forms. Okay, that will be part 2. When we get to part 3, we'll be looking for places where he puts sentences together strangely. Okay, so that's what we'll do. We'll bring that with you on Thursday, and we'll work our way through it. As far as homework goes, that's please. So, I already mentioned this one. We've already talked about phonetics, which was looking at individual sounds, right? And we grew that just a little bit, start looking at how sounds change based on the other sounds that are around them. And then we also talked about morphology, which was growing this idea of sounds and actually putting them into words, and how we can change those words around, how we add something to it to make the meaning even very slightly different, right? We talked about the fact that cats mean something different than cat. Right? If for no other reason than in one case we're talking about 2 or more, and in the other case we're talking about 1. So there's a difference in the meaning, right? The cat, the cats. So very different there. That's what we were talking about with morphology. We also looked at how we can make that more complicated than just putting an S on a noun. But we've been through that. Now we're moving into syntax. And this is going to be looking at how we take words, put them into phrases. We'll take phrases sometimes and move them into clauses, which we'll discuss, and how these things combine into form sentences. Normally, we'll have to recognize that we have sentences that can be declarative sentences, just stating a fact. We can also have things like questions where we're asking for information or clarifying something. We've got imperatives where we're commanding somebody to do something. But this is all part of syntax, and you'll find when you get to 310, if you haven't already, that questions are formed a little bit differently in English than just declarative statements. Other languages don't do much different. Spanish, for instance, doesn't really care which order the verb and the subject go. English does make a difference. Now, something to recognize before we get too far into phrases, and that is in common usage, when we're normally talking about a phrase, we would think we're talking about more than one word, 2 or more words that are going together. And that's valid. I mean, most of the time, that's really the case. We could go cat, that's a word. The cat sounds like a phrase. right? A noun phrase to be specific. But in linguistics, sometimes even a single word can be a phrase. And I know that sounds strange, but as we get moving along, you're going to see that sentences aren't really made up of individual words. It's probably more precise to say sentences are made up of phrases. And we're going to see how that works and why that's so as we go along. But in the case of linguistics, a phrase can be a single word. Now, it could confuse you, but we're going to look at how we might be able to tell the difference between them. Okay, so we get ready to go today. We're only going to look at parts of speech. We're going to say phrases, actually, and what phrase structure looks like. We're going to do that on Thursday. I kind of think, I set it up this way, so that there is reading about phrases, but I'm going to ask you to wait until next week to read about it. Okay? I don't know, it's pages 49 to 60 or something. We're going to talk about it first on Thursday. Next week, you should have read it by the time we get back in on Tuesday, because it'll give you something to build on by talking about it first. If, on the other hand, you say, oh, Armor, you're full of baloney, I'm going to read this stuff, feel free. It's up to you. However you want to do it. Okay? So what are the 8 parts of speech? Let us start to name them. Oh, we'll start right at the front. I'm assuming you've got the easy one because you got 8 to choose from, and you would choose. Well, that's a sentence function. So we're really looking for a part of speech. What kind of word goes in to give something? Okay, I know. Nouns. All right, great. So we've got nouns. What else do we have, Sebastian? Verbs. Jen. Adjective. Kendra. It's harder now. Okay, adverbs. He's left file with you now. What else do we have? When we stand, you're going to feel very cool. Oh, I knew that. What's your function? Junction. What's your function? Everybody knows Schoolhouse Rock. I'm old. Pronouns are good. That's your function. Conjunction, junction. What's your function? How many do we have so far? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Isabel. What did you look at? Oh, man. Jeez. All right. Well, prepositions. One more. Actually, this one, I think doesn't really matter very much. One more that's on there is what? Actually, that might be. What do you got? What else you got? You can't think about it? You can't cheat. Just because she cheated, you can't cheat. Our pod. What else we got? Oh, man. You're so smart. Articles. There we go. We still got one more. Wow. Okay, interjection. Now I'm going to kind of skip the interjections part. Who cares? I mean, everybody learns the interjections, and they don't have lots of rules around the interjections. But we do have to pay attention to some of the other ones. The other ones are pretty important. So you may remember, I think in this class, we talked about this as we started morphology. We said we had open class words. Nouns, verbs, adjectives, and adverbs. Anybody remember why they called open?
Because it can be at the end of the sentence.
They will end up in every sentence, okay, that's part of it. What else? What else is open about these? We have new ones all the time. In the open class nouns, we've got lots of new nouns. You can talk about the computer era and say we've got BYTE bytes, right? Or gigabytes. Everybody knows that when you run down to Best Buy. That's a new noun, a gigabyte. Verbs. Well, it used to be that friend, the word friend was a noun. A noun today, a noun tomorrow, always a noun. And now we have Facebook where you can friend people, which makes it a what? A verb, right? Or we could do weird things like unfriend people. But okay, friend, adjectives. I know we've come up with new adjectives. I'm not quite sure. I don't know. Anybody give me a new adjective, something that is new? Sometimes it's a word that we didn't use that way in the past. Gay is an example of that one, right? Now we've got gay, it doesn't mean happy and festive anymore, right? Like Don, we know are gay apparel. That'd be a new adjective, even though it's an existing word, it's now a new meaning. And adverbs, I can't think of one, but I'm sure that's out there. Now, that's the open class. What was the other group? What's the other group? We had open class words and we had the opposite of open class words. Must be closed class words. Exactly. We also call them function words because they don't carry as much meaning as the open class words do usually. And they have very specific grammatical functions. So, prepositions. All of those are the things like at, in, on, as well as things like despite and in spite of. Those are prepositions. We'll be talking about those. Terribly difficult to learn in the second language. Conjunctions, because we know our function in conjunction. Pronouns. I think we've already talked about pronouns. Did we talk about pronouns? In this class, I'm not sure if we did. But those are the words like he and she and it, and so forth. And then we've got determiners. Now, determiners are oftentimes articles, a, an, and the. Those are the most common determiners. But determiners is much bigger than that. You'll spend some time in 310 learning about determiners and the fact that even things like every and each and none, sometimes no, can all be determiners. But for our purposes, mostly what we're going to be thinking about is articles, a, and the. And sometimes it's going to also include things like this, that, and these, and those. And there's several others. So we should be thinking in terms of this big umbrella classification called determiners. Articles are within that umbrella. And I've scratched off interjections because they're really not very interesting to me. So don't have a whole bunch of rules, don't have a whole bunch of things to think about. But those are the things like, wow, from the old Batman day. Zoom, zowie, all kinds of. Anybody from the old Batman days? When people's parents were born before 1967. United States. They'll know about that. Now, what are the 8 parts of speech? Well, here's what we're going to do. We're going to talk about each one of these 8. And let's see, where did I leave off? I started getting idle nose. Oh no, Isabel looked it up on a piece of paper. Lupe tried to look it up on paper, but I caught her ahead of time. Tell me, what is a noun? Well, I'm more interested in a definition, but if you want to give me an example of a noun, I'll live with it.
Arpod, what are nouns? Right, so they're going to be words that kind of tell us about person, places, and things. Things is this super wide kind of a category because it includes the things we can see like tables and lights, but it also includes ideas and feelings like happiness and bravery. Got lots of different classifications for nouns, but person, place, and thing is essentially what we would call a noun. What else can you tell me about nouns? I'm going to give you one. They can get into lots of different categories. We've got concrete nouns and abstract nouns. That would be things like table and bravery as concrete and abstract. Can't really see, touch, feel, smell, hear bravery. So, proper versus common. What's a proper noun? Selma, what's a proper noun versus a common noun? Exactly. It's going to be the name, a very specific name of a person, place, or thing. And then we've got count and non-count nouns. Galley, I don't think I've even gotten back that far today. Galley, what is a non-count noun? Really? Cynthia, buddy, what is a non-count noun? I'm sorry? That's okay. Yeah. A non-count noun is a noun that sometimes it's kind of general, kind of like an abstract noun. Sometimes, what else? A non-count noun cannot be, you can't count it. Right. So can you give me an example? Air. Very good. We don't count air. I don't walk into the room and say, I got 10,000 airs in here. We got air. We could talk about something else like rice. We could count each little individual rice, but typically we call it rice, right? Now, similar things, milk. Well, I could say, milk's a non-count noun, unless I'm a little kid in the school lunch line and say, yeah, I want 2 milks. But when I say I want 2 milks, what did I really ask for? 2 little containers of milk, right? 2 little cartons of milk. So we can take non-count nouns and put them into something countable, but in and of themselves, they're not really that way. Sand, rice are my 2 big examples. What else? Well, normally nouns answer questions like who, what, and where, because we know that it's going to be person, places, or things. Where are you going? The store. Who are you going to see? The storekeeper, etc. Most of the time, count nouns can be pluralized. We don't normally pluralize non-count nouns, but for all the other ones, we typically can pluralize them. We can put 2 in the front. I can't say I have 2 airs, but I could say I have 2 dogs, right? Or 2 apples. So they oftentimes can be pluralized, and they can also be marked as possessive. That's the dog's bed. The rice, this aroma, maybe we can do that when you cook the rice, get an aroma. That can be made possessive. And some of the ways you would look at morphology to tell what you've got, we've got things like the S going on the end for plural, or apostrophe S for possession. We can see ER on the end. If the front part is a verb, we've seen a lot of places where we put ER on the end of the verb, and it becomes the person or thing doing the action. And then there are a bunch of other suffixes that you've run across already. Shun in there, inform, and then I go Asian, information, or capital and capitalism, and a bit able and ability. So these are some of the things that we've already seen. Okay, now that's going to be important
we get into syntax to really get a good handle on these, I'm hoping that all I'm really doing is refreshing your memory, making you look at something that you've already learned before. But if they're not, it's important to look at that one sheet that I gave you and probably even go out on the internet, kind of look at definitions of these parts of speech. Tell me about verbs. Christina, we're coming back to you. Oh, no, I'm sorry. Cynthia, we're coming back to you. Jeez, you guys got to sit on different answers. Okay. Tell me about verbs. What's a verb? It's an action word, right? There's some word that represents an action. Like what? Right. Run, talk, walk, all of those, right? Great. What else are verbs though? Action words is great, but it's only half the picture. It's the problem. Everybody forgets it. Don't be Christina, what's the other half? Oh, Lupe.
Say, state.
State of being, right? So the most common state of being verb would be to be. So we've got I am, you are, he, she, it is. That's a state of being verb. Is what? Is hungry, is old, etc. So we've also got these state of being verbs, and people seem to forget that all the time. So let's remember action words as well as state of being. Verbs also show time of occurrence. We call that verb tense. And what we may look at a lot in this class might be looking at verb tense. There are some other minor things, I probably shouldn't call them minor, but for this class's perspective, knowing the difference between tense and aspect really isn't very important, or voice and mood. These are some other things that verbs change to indicate. But the big one that we're interested in is time of occurrence, the tense. Then they come in morphological forms that we might recognize. They come in a base form. That's the one you brought to the dictionary to look up. If somebody says, I spoke yesterday, you wouldn't probably find spoke in the dictionary, right? You would have to look up what? Speak. So that's the base form. It's not the same as the present tense. Some people say, oh, it's the same as the present tense because I speak, you speak, we speak, they speak. But it's different for one group. He, she, or it speaks. Right? He, she, or it speaks. So it's not the same as the base form when we have a change like that. Another way we can look at it is present tense, past tense, participles, present and past. You can also look at infinitives, which are the verb with to in front, or gerunds, which in English would have an ing at the end and you'd be used as a noun, like I like swimming. Okay, but those are some of the things to look for verbs. Also, if you have a declarative sentence, the verb is going to come after the subject in almost every case. And in questions, things switch around. What else do we have? Classifications of verbs. We got main verbs, auxiliary verbs. Tell me what auxiliary verbs are. Somebody remembers. You heard them called something different in grade school. You remember? Huh? What kind of verbs? Auxiliary verbs, we also call them oh man, why you be so quiet? Okay, yes. So we got helping verbs. We call them helping verbs all the time when we were in grade school. We're going to call them auxiliary verbs, but it's things like have and I have seen, or am as in I am going. Going would be the main verb, but the auxiliary would be am or have. I have gone. And then
there's modals, which are just kind of a special part of auxiliary verbs. These things are things like should, could, would, will, etc. So we've got those to deal with. I am tall, state of being. I can go, it's a modal verb because go is the real verb that we're talking about. A helping verb or auxiliary verb have, a main verb, I have a dog. He is being silly and she should have gone by now. Modal, auxiliary or helping verb and a past participle. So these things string together. You'll see a lot of this when we get to 310, right? Yep. Right. Let's see, several types of verbs, intensive verbs, intransitive verbs, transitive, ditransitive, object, predicative, or something more normally called complex tenses. Don't worry about those in this class. They show up in 310. We'll run into them a lot there. Morphological clues, things like ed on the end of a word, like walk and walk. S, as in he speaks. Ing, I am speaking. Let's see, Putin decided he wanted to nationalize some of the American industries that were pulling out of Russia. He wanted to nationalize it. Disable. D as in declassify, all kinds of different things that we can look at. Certain morphemes are related to verbs, some more usually related to nouns or adjectives. Adjectives, okay. I want to go somewhere. S, Isabel. Isabel, what is an adjective?
Describe something.
It describes some. No, okay, it does describe a noun. I was just looking, you said the whole thing, something. Thing is a what? It's a noun, right? So adjectives are going to be things that describe nouns and pronouns. I always had a hard time coming up with a descriptive word or an adjective for a pronoun until somebody says, oh, poor me. Well, poor me. Pronouns. Adjectives modify nouns and pronouns. Most adjectives, but not all, can be made comparative. So we saw this in morphology where we said take ER and put it at the end of an adjective, and you got more of that adjective. Or put EST on the end and you've got molds of that. We've got other things, let's see. We do end up with them coming in long strings, potentially. And when they do, well, we do things like separate them with commas. We also realize that there's probably some rules that none of us can actually just up and state that says what is the order that they go in. But if I said a metal round big Chinese golden serving spoon, it would probably sound a little strange. Certainly a red big balloon. What should it be? A red big balloon? Is that how you say it? How do you say it? A big red balloon. Why? Well, there's some rules out there somewhere, and it's something that our students will have to learn. We kind of trip into it most of the time. In English, they usually come before the noun, right? Blue sky, red ball, big balloon, etc. There are some that come after the linking verbs, like the sky is blue. Well, I could say the blue sky, or the sky is blue. The blue is the adjective. It can go before or after. Those are called attributive imperatives. It is going on. Don't even memorize that. It'll be worth throwing in 310. Right, Sebastian? You'll need to know it'll be a like or this. What? Yes, it's grammar, right? Exactly. All right. Morphological cues. Oh, Or we might see OUS as in fable and fabulous. Less, what would be a good example there? Hope and hopeless. Hopeful, doable, and the stuff at the end like IBE when we saw act. So sometimes you can look at the endings or the beginnings of the word, the prefixes, and they help. And adverbs. So we had adjectives to describe nouns and pronouns. Mandy, what do you think adverbs do?
Describe the verb.
They describe the verbs. Can you give me an example? Ran.
Most of the time end with L.
A lot of times they're going to end with ly. I wouldn't say.
That's what I
A lot
most of the
times they
time
do.
think of adverb.
Huh?
That's what I mostly think when I see the word.
If you take an ly and you put it on the end of an adjective, you get an adverb. Unfortunately, you can take an ly and put it on the end of a noun and you get an adjective like friend and friendly. So you can't always depend on the ly, but it's a good place to start. So give me an adverb for run.
For run, running,
No, you got to give me an adverb with an ly on the end.
slowly,
Okay, very good. I was hoping you'd say fast or quickly, but you're sticking with slowly. Okay, here we go. Adverbs, modify, describe, verbs, right? But they also describe adjectives, and they also describe other adverbs. Here's a good case. Here's a good example. An adverb would be the word very. It's a very common. It's a really common adverb, even though it's not really talking about verbs and action. But very does describe adjectives like she is very pretty. It also does it for adverbs. He is running very slowly. It's a very common word, and we use it all the time, and I can't avoid it in myself. But they're going to verbs, adjectives, and other adverbs. Sometimes they'll actually kind of modify a whole sentence or a clause. Unfortunately, here's a good one. Unfortunate and unfortunately, that's an adverb, right? Unfortunately, I have to go now. It's kind of modifying the whole sentence. So, he quickly ran. Oh, this is pretty interesting. You can oftentimes put the adverb all kinds of places in the sentence. He quickly ran. He ran quickly. Quickly, he ran. It can move all over the place. And that will be an important thing as we start looking at certain types of sentence functions. Another one is I have never. In that case, would be an adverb. And one of the most confusing word classes because they do so many things. They tell you when something happened, where something happened, how it happened, how often it happened. And oftentimes adverbs are actually, adverb functions are shown in different kinds of structure. So we'll see that as we go along. But there's the things. So how did something happen? We got the things that do whole sentences or whole clauses. We've got degree. How much? He did it a lot. Or he did it how often? He did it frequently. Place and time. I went, I sat. I sat there yesterday. So those would both be there. That's giving you the place, and yesterday giving you the time. This one's really complicated, so you've got to pay close attention to adverbs. Be quick to point them out when you see it changing a verb or an adjective or an adverb. Okay, so that was the open classes. Now we got to get down to the closed classes, prepositions, conjunctions, pronouns, and determiners. The big thing about closed classes, we typically don't create new ones. I mean, the same conjunctions that we've had for 1,000 years, or no, let's say 500 years, we still have 500. We still have the same ones for 500. Until recently, pronoun was frozen. We had he, she, and it. Now we've got other things. Determiners. We got a, and the as the biggies. And when we look at a, and the, we've had those for centuries. We haven't generated any new ones. And prepositions are pretty much frozen as well. We've got a whole bunch of them. We've had them forever. So let's talk about prepositions. They show relationships, spatial relationships. This book is on the table and we are all in the classroom and the clock is on the wall. That's spatial relationship, right? We also have time relationships. I'm going to do that in February. I'm going to do it on Monday. I'm going to do it at 9 o'clock. So we've got time relationships. And oftentimes these prepositions are very confusing to our students, especially English language learning students, because while everybody has something like prepositions, they don't seem to match up very well. I'll give you some examples. But they might show spatial and time relationships. They show direction to something, towards something, or from something. How about this one? Grammatical relationships. These are the tough ones. Try to describe or define for somebody what does for mean? Or what does of mean? By might be a little easier because they might think about it being spatial. It's by the book, by the door. But it could also be by the time I get anyway, and then we've got manner down here. How did it happen? So all of these are some things that we've got to worry about. And for our students, you look at these and you go, these should be really easy to learn. They got 3 letters, 2 letters. Oh, once in a while we've got 5, but most of the time they're little short words. But they are very difficult words to really get a hold of. Why are they so difficult? Well, we've got this word called polysemy. Polysemy. What does poly mean? Many. And semi in this particular case is kind of like synonyms. Polysemy means we've got very many usages of a word. The Oxford Dictionary has 30 different meanings or different usages for the word on. Sometimes it's clear. It's on, the hand is on the table. But other times it's not so clear, like on time. Or, let's see, that's a good example, on time. There are 30 different ways we can use on. Try memorizing 30 ways to use on. You would find it to be a very difficult thing, particularly say for Spanish speakers, because sometimes in Spanish we could say in, and that could also mean in or on. And so a lot of times Spanish speakers will find that to be a big problem word. For me, I will never get por and para correct. For me, they will always be my biggest mistake. Gracias para, no, por. Okay, fine. Anyway, so we've got that issue. And so it works in both directions. As you learn new languages, it's tough. They don't translate across languages. If I was going to say, talk about my wife, I am married to my wife. But in Spanish, it would really translate as I am married with my wife. And so it's a difficult thing for students to start to pull these things apart and get them right. Sometimes they're idiomatically required with no explanation. Why do I jump to a conclusion? You've heard me say that, or you've heard people say jump to a conclusion, right? Why didn't they say jump on a conclusion? Why is it on time and not at time? Seemed like at time would be better. places where there's no good reason, but there has been a rule set up that this word will go with that preposition. And that makes it very difficult. Fed up with that. What's the with? I didn't get fed up with. I can't say fed up on that. And collocation requirements kind of similar to this. On Tuesday at 9 a.m. and in February. Who came up with that stupid rule? It's a stupid rule, right? So, where do we find preposition? All over the place. From the very beginning, there were books. There were books from the very beginning. Look at that. Now, all of a sudden, I've got this moving around, and how is the student supposed to figure that out? There have always, from the very beginning, been books. And where did that book come from? Very difficult. So, notice that it's moving around on these three. Means exactly the same thing. Three different ways to say it, but you're basically saying the same words in different orders, the same phrases in different orders, with the same meaning. Conjunctions, everybody knows the song. What did they do? What do they do, actually? What do conjunctions do? Jump. Repeat. Jump. Junction. Yes, they do something with functions. That's a good one. That's not quite right, but that's a good one. Conjunction.
Bring them together.
We pull things together, right? Sometimes it's red, white, and blue. Sometimes it might be, I did this and I went to the store. I live here, but I hate the snow. All kinds of different ways that we use those. And so they join different parts of sentences together. Interesting, something that you may never have thought of. And it becomes important when you think about where your teachers may have written things and said parallelism on your essays as freshmen. Well, they join two words, they join words together, or they join phrases together, or clauses together, or sentences together. They do not add a word to a sentence or a phrase and a clause. They actually add things together that are the same level. And types of conjunctions, coordinating ones, you probably all know these: for, and, nor, but, or, yet, so, right? The fanboys. Both coordinating conjunctions. Correlated conjunctions, they occur in pairs, like neither this nor that, either this or that. There's a couple of correlative ones. Subordinating conjunctions, where we take something and we make it less than something. We take a sentence and make it less than a sentence to add it to another one. Then we've got all of these things, but I never figured out why they call them conjunctive adverbs. Therefore, nonetheless, although, however, consequently, therefore, and all the other. Pronouns are something that take the place of noun phrases. Now, you've always learned, as did I, that pronouns are used to replace nouns. But in fact, it's not the nouns that they replace, it's the noun phrases. If I took the noun phrase, the Queen of England, I can't change it to she of England, the she of England. I have to take that whole phrase, the Queen of England, and replace it with she. Now, obviously, if I said John is old, and then I changed it to he is old, I did change just the noun, but remember what I said earlier. Sometimes phrases are a single word. So it's the rule is that they really replace noun phrases. They have personal ones, like I, you, he, she, it, we, they, etc. We've got the object version, which we use in different circumstances, right? Like he gave it to me, he didn't give it to I. And so we've got the object pronouns. We've got possessive pronouns. We've got reflexive pronouns. Man, I hate those reflexive pronouns. Anybody watch TV with the My Pillow guy? Huh? It comes on the news every 5 minutes, every commercial break. You got the guy sitting there going, these people have canceled myself and my company. Myself is the wrong word. It should be they canceled me. And I got this feeling that people are trying to sound fancy, using bigger words than necessary. And they sound stupid if you know what they're saying. My pet peeve, how are you? I'm fine. And yourself? Wait a minute, you don't use say and yourself, it's and you. See? Kendra's with me, right? Yeah. Okay, so we're cooking. Indefinite pronouns are the things like everything and something and nothing and anybody and somebody and nobody. They're not very specific. They are indefinite, but they do the same thing. The people in the store, I could change it to everybody in the store or nobody in the store. And so pronouns that are indefinite, we've got some that look like determiners, but they're actually not. This, that, these, and those. Relative pronouns, those we will see when we get into looking at clauses, so don't worry too much about that for now. And then we've got interrogative pronouns like who, what, and where, which. Now the biggies determiners, we're almost done. I think this is like number 8 of 8. What in the world are determiners? You probably, if you haven't had 310, probably never heard of that word before. I never did, and I was 55 when I heard about it. So you don't have to do that. Look how much further ahead you are. They have a descriptive function. They're kind of like adjectives in a way, because they kind of describe or modify which ones am I talking about. Okay. But they have descriptive function and oftentimes specifying which members of some group we're talking about, like the or a. A cat could be any cat in the world. The cat is a particular one that we both know we're talking about, and so forth. We typically call these articles. All right, but it's probably better to call them determiners because articles is just one sentence. Predeterminers, central determiners, and post determiners. One of the most important things to remember about determiners is they have 3 places in the sentence or 3 places in a noun phrase, but you can only have 1 or 0 in each one of those places. For instance, you can't say "the my children." You can say "my children," that's great. You say "the children," that's fine, but you can't say "the my children." Only one can go in there. And the same thing happens in the front, in the center, and in the last position. Once again, when you get into 310, you'll get a much better view of all of that. I think Spanish, I've been thinking about this. For all the Spanish speakers in the group. Why is it that I say otro día instead of día otro? Because adjectives come after the words, right? Quinta roja. Why don't we say otro after día? Can you tell me why? Sounds good to me. They're determiners. You never think about it, but they're determiners, and the determiners go in front of the nouns in Spanish as well as they do in English. And I just, took me a long time, and I just kind of kept looking at it. That's the deal. The determiners come before. And they're oftentimes the same words. Anyway, just trying to impress you with my flexibility. Okay. They are not adjectives, however. Your books, many books will tell you that determiners are adjectives. They kind of act a little bit like adjectives, but there are several differences that are important. If you look at these, I said there are three possible slots in front of a noun, and only the predeterminers can go only in the first slot, the central determiners only in the minute, and the post-determiners only at the end. But when you get out to looking at something like a big golden bowl, all of the other things that I had with the Chinese serving spoon, there was something of an order there, but we could take them in, put them out, have multiples, and so forth. So we are really into the fact that they are not adjectives. It may only be important to me. However, the 8 common parts of speech we talked about, we basically blew out interjections and went with determinant instead. As we get into this, we're going to jump over and get into phrases next. However, please take the parts of speech thing that I sent you yesterday, and let's take a look at these, and we'll work through the first 2 together. And then you can do the rest between now and Thursday. So I'm going to take this first one. And it is the woman combs her hair. The woman combs her hair. Okay, simple sentence, nothing to it. What is the? What kind of a part of speech is the? It's an article, and we also want to call those. Can't do it 3 times, I fall down. What are they? Determiner. Articles is true, it's a correct answer, but let's look at determiners because it will help us with some of the other things we see in the future. So I'm going to call this a D. The woman. Who looked up? Selma. Woman. What kind of a word is woman? You know what? Oh, that's okay. You can see it up there. The woman combs her hair. What is woman? Big yellow pill. Oh, yeah. Did you say that? Okay, great. Now, so the woman is a person, place, or thing, right? So that's going to be a noun. How about combs? Cynthia. Verb. I agree. Why is it a verb? Is an action, right? Now, the one that you're going to get wrong is probably her. Who do I want to have get this wrong? Sebastian, you're big and strong, big broad shoulders. What kind of a word is her? No, but everybody thinks it is, but it's really not. Because it isn't replacing a noun phrase. You wouldn't recognize that, but that is going to be a determinant, okay? Because possessive words end up being determinant. Everybody wants to call it out as a pronoun, including me, but it's really not. Because it's not replacing anything. It's basically specifying whose hair. Did she comb her daughter's hair? No. Did she comb her husband's hair? No. She combed her hair, specifying whose hair? Kendra, we got hair at the end. I agree with that. So that's what I'm looking for you to do. How about this one? The boy should comb his hair. Sebastian, just to give you a big shot to redeem yourself. What is his? No, very good. All right, so we got that one. The boy. Gally, what is the? Determiner. How about boy? Christina. Now, should. Okay, who do I hate today? This will be another one of those that you probably get wrong. What is should? Very good. It's a modal verb. It's an auxiliary verb. So in this particular case, we've got this verb, it's a special kind of verb. What is comb?
Verb.
Verb. So notice sometimes we get more than one verb together. We could have said should have comb even, right? We can get extra words in there. And then hair, let's see. Who needs to be here? Okay. Right? I want you to go through there and run through these and mark them all. Okay. There's also exercise A, which is kind of a similar thing in the textbook. So those two things are what you need to bring with you. And probably actually no more reading unless you haven't read the first part of this chapter. You might want to do that if you haven't. We're going to move on from individual words to phrases as we look at Thursday stuff. Okay, questions? And then as a final review, what are you supposed to do if you find mistakes in your test paper scoring? Let me know so we can fix it. Okay? I hope you guys have a good day. Hope you're glad to be back. If you're not glad to be back, just look at the right side. It's the second half of the semester. So half of it's already. Other than that, I'll see you on Thursday. Yeah. It's a lot like a dog. And so it's the reason that's the reason I usually use. But it's actually, they actually use it to specify who's here. A pronoun would be her, would be her hair. Hers, she owns hers. But if you say her, it's going to be it's working because we've always thought of it as being a pronoun, but it really isn't. But I know everybody who is here. Oh, yes, ma'am.